In the early 1900s, Boston's North End was a bustling, tightly packed neighborhood teeming with life. Immigrants from around the world called it home, filling its streets with markets, factories, and constant activity. The area was a hub for industry, with warehouses, docks, and rail lines crisscrossing its narrow streets. At the heart of this industrial web stood a towering steel tank, 50 feet tall and 90 feet wide, owned by the Purity Distilling Company. The tank held a seemingly innocent cargo, molasses. But this thick, sugary syrup was far more than a kitchen staple. During this time, molasses was a critical ingredient in producing industrial alcohol used to make explosives and liquor. Its importance made the tank a prominent feature of the North End's skyline, though few questioned its safety. It was a time when regulations were lax and companies prioritized profit over precaution. This set the stage for a disaster no one could have predicted, but would never forget. It was just after lunchtime on January 15, 1919, when disaster struck. Without warning, a deafening rumble echoed through the North End as the massive molasses tank split wide open. Witnesses described a sound like gunfire, followed by the roar of rushing liquid. Over 2 million gallons of molasses surged out, forming a wave that reached up to 25 feet high. This sticky, unstoppable flood swept through the streets at an astonishing 35 miles per hour, demolishing everything in its path. Buildings crumbled as their foundations gave way under the pressure. A freight train was knocked clean off its tracks. Horses and wagons were engulfed, and pedestrians had no chance of escape. The sheer weight of the molasses turned it into a deadly force, trapping victims in a thick, suffocating mass. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but found themselves struggling to move through the syrupy chaos. The disaster left behind a shocking scene of destruction, and the toll would soon reveal the full extent of the tragedy. 21 dead, over 150 injured, and a city forever scarred by an unimaginable event. In the aftermath of the disaster, the question loomed: how could something so catastrophic happen? Investigators quickly zeroed in on the massive steel tank, and the answers painted a grim picture of negligence. The tank had been poorly constructed from the start. Its thin steel walls were far too weak to hold the weight of 2.3 million gallons of molasses. Workers had even reported hearing creaks and groans from the structure long before the disaster, but their warnings were ignored. To make matters worse, the company behind the tank, Purity Distilling Company, had rushed its construction in 1915, prioritizing speed and cost over safety. Reports revealed that the tank was never properly tested for leaks, and molasses often seeped through its walls, something the company covered up by painting the tank brown. Adding to the controversy, Purity Distilling claimed the disaster was caused by sabotage, possibly by anarchists or enemies of the company. But after years of legal battles, the courts rejected this theory. Investigators concluded that corporate negligence was to blame, marking one of the first instances where a company was held accountable for a major industrial disaster in the U.S. The findings sparked public outrage, sending a clear message about the dangers of cutting corners and the critical need for stricter safety regulations, a legacy that would shape industries for years to come. More than a century later, the Great Molasses Flood remains etched in Boston's history, remembered as both a bizarre tragedy and a cautionary tale. Locals still share stories of how molasses seeped into every corner of the North End, and the event has inspired books, documentaries, and even jokes about the day Boston got stuck. But beyond its strange and almost surreal nature, the flood is a stark reminder of the cost of negligence. It highlighted the critical need for safety and accountability in industrial practices, lessons that resonate even today in an era of rapid technological progress. The site of the disaster, now a quiet neighborhood park, bears little resemblance to the chaos of 1919. Yet, every year, visitors and locals alike reflect on the molasses flood, not just as a historical oddity, but as a symbol of how communities rebuild, learn, and grow from even the stickiest of tragedies. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 is a haunting reminder of how small oversights can lead to massive disasters. From the streets of Boston submerged in syrup to the sweeping changes in industrial safety that followed, its legacy endures as both a tragedy and a lesson. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more captivating historical tales, and let us know in the comments. What's the most surprising part of this story to you? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.